Hi all, Old Geek here, and in this video I'm going to try to give some advice to players, not DMs this time, but players. I ran a one-shot scenario for a group of new Call of Cthulhu players recently, and while they lent into their characters well and did a great job of engaging with the scenario, they ultimately failed in their task. Of course, this is common with the game, especially with regards to one-shots, because they do tend to have higher lethality than campaign-orientated scenarios. So, why did they fail this time? Well, in this video, you'll find out, and hopefully if you follow the tips I'm going to give in this video, then you'll have more chance of success. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Tip number 1. Remember, you are investigators. The Call of Cthulhu rulebooks all refer to PCs in the game as investigators. So whatever your character's profession may be, you still need to investigate. Your keeper will drop hints throughout the game when describing the environment, areas, interactions, and other details. These may not be immediately obvious, but in my experience, every name, every location, every object needs to be noted and examined. In our game, I described the town where the investigators began, a fictional place called Gamwell. It's the scenario The Cracked and Crooked Manse from Mansions of Madness. You'll see that behind me. I described it as a small town with basic amenities including a police station, a small library, a local newspaper office, and a town hall. I mentioned these places specifically as my group were new players, and all of these locations were detailed in the scenario and contained clues. But my group decided to go straight out of the town to the house that is the main focus of the adventure. This meant that they were totally blind with regards to the background of the place and what, if anything, they might need. There were enough clues at the house itself in order to succeed in the scenario, but piecing them together immediately became much more unlikely. When they reached the house, they were very thorough, but the odds were already stacked firmly against them. And with many Call of Cthulhu scenarios, the odds do appear to be stacked against the investigators, but the point of the preparation is to push the odds in your favour, at least a little. So tip number 2, following on from tip number 1, be methodical. Make notes. Call of Cthulhu scenarios are typically highly detailed. You are unlikely to remember every little snippet, and you never know which piece of seemingly innocuous information will prove to be ultimately critical to your success. Most scenarios also have a variety of handouts. If you get one of these, study it. Keep it safe. Refer back to it. These handouts are made available by the writers for a reason. Tip number 3. And this refers mainly to one-shot scenarios, such as the one I ran at the weekend, and the pre-generated characters that are supplied for such scenarios. Lean into aspects of your character's personality, traits, quirks, and maybe aspects of their background if relevant. When I create pre-gens for my groups, I do so with the scenario in mind. I try to give them personalities that will engage with the story well and that will hopefully prompt worthwhile interactions with some or all of the NPCs, as well as each other. I also try to ensure that they have a variety of skills which should prove useful. My group did a very good job of utilising the characters that I gave them. They played up their traits and used them to provide motivation for their investigations, which was exactly my intention. Even though it did not bring them success, it certainly enhanced the enjoyment of the adventure. If you are creating your own investigators, ensure you make characters that will be willing to investigate. Give them connections to each other, to the location, and to any relevant NPCs that you may know beforehand, if any. Call of Cthulhu games are all about tension, and if you make a PC that is disinterested, disengaged, then you only have yourself to blame if the game itself ends up feeling flat. This leads me naturally on to tip 4. The responsibility for generating atmosphere and tension does not rest solely with the keeper. Practice describing your character's actions in terms of the game environment rather than the game mechanics. Because remember, your character is not thinking in terms of the mechanics. You know the impact of a sanity roll. You know what actions might prompt a sanity check. Your character does not. And here are some descriptions to think of. I try to swerve to avoid the figure in the road. That is much preferred to, can I make a drive auto check to avoid hitting the figure in the road? Be decisive with your character's actions. I think the sheriff might be lying. Does he look nervous? Is a better way of prompting a psychology roll than, can I make a psychology roll to see if the sheriff is lying? And dress your character's actions up with little touches and flourishes. I glare at the lead cultist, slowly extend my middle finger towards him, then draw my Colt 45 and fire at him. Or, I take a swig from my hip flask to boost my courage, then fling the shutters wide before diving out of the window. Or, ew, I pinch my nose with my left hand, grimace, and plunge my right hand into the drain. These little pieces of added description will add spice to the game, and your keeper will be very grateful for their inclusion. But, going back to mechanics, and time for tip number 5, make use of the skills that your investigators have. You never know when the dice might fall in your favour, and you never know when a seemingly obscure skill might prove to be critical. Try actions for dramatic effect too. Here are 2 examples in some of my games of investigators defying the odds. Playing Forget-Me-Not, a very tough scenario. One of my groups managed to complete it because one investigator succeeded on a locksmith roll. He had 1% in the skill, and he rolled 0-1. It was a great moment that turned the adventure in their favour. And when playing the Blood Red Fez, one of the investigators was fleeing the carnage at the end. His character, an overweight, middle-aged librarian with terrible physical attributes. He stated that he was diving for a boat that was slowly drifting out of his reach. I called for a dexterity roll. The odds were not in his favour. The dice bounced across the table. Critical success. Embrace those successes against the odds, but equally embrace the failures. The moments when sanity breaks at key moments, or your gun jams, those moments of panic, play them up and make them memorable. Because often, in Call of Cthulhu, memories will be all you have left. Well, I hope you find these tips useful. Call of Cthulhu is a great game, especially if you lean into it and play it as it is intended. I've been the Old Geek. I hope you enjoyed the video. Till next time, see ya.